Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Espedia and I'm here with Jeff Shearer at Tykes&Teens, and today we are going to be talking about holiday depression and stress. So here we are 4 days out from Christmas, and I know that's already stressful. I'm already stressed out, okay, just saying that. And you know, there's such a societal expectation to be happy during the holidays. You know, it's all over TV, everybody feels just this need to be happy, and the reality is that a lot of people just aren't. And there are numerous reasons for that, which we'll get into. But I wanted to mention that Jeff wrote a really great guest column for the Stewart News and TC Palm on this subject, and you can read that now at tcpalm.com. It is also on the TC Palm Facebook page, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you talk about in that column. Okay. But before we get into that, I'm going to have Jeff introduce himself, as I always do. I know that sometimes we have new people joining us who are not familiar with Jeff or with Tykes&Teens. So Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, my name is Jeff Shearer, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a co-founder of Tykes&Teens. We've been providing services for over 21 years. I'm a Florida State grad, and mental health is something I'm very passionate about. So what was your other question?
I think that was it. I just wanted you to introduce yourself for those that may not know you. So I think you covered it.
Well, I think so.
So let's jump in. So there are, as I mentioned, a lot of reasons that someone may not feel happy during the holiday season, and we're going to touch on all of those. But one big one is grief. And that can be, you know, if someone has lost a family member or a close friend this year and they're getting ready to spend their first holiday without that person, or perhaps you lost someone during the holiday season several years ago, and so every year the holidays brings that back up for you. That's a really tough one, and it's one that I see a lot of people struggling with. And Jeff, I know that when you and I were talking the other day, you shared something with me that is your own personal struggle with a grief experience during the holidays, and I was wondering if you would share that.
Sure. Yes, in relation, I think grief is a big part of especially grief of a family member, because when we think of the holidays, what we think of is family time. Right. You know, that most people, you know, when you go on the streets, you know, it's very vacant because everyone is spending time with their family members. Mm-hmm. So my brother somewhat unexpectedly died in 2000. It was interesting enough, my parents were having a holiday party at their house, which was on Sunday evening, and he had called at the end of the evening around 8 o'clock and said, hey, you know, I'm in the hospital, I'm not doing well. He did have had been diagnosed with AIDS, HIV, mm-hmm. So that's an autoimmune, but he had been very, very healthy, mm-hmm. Basically the entire time that he had it. So despite not having much of an immune system, he always had a very good constitution. Mm. We never had gotten a phone call like this before, so it was very startling. Right. And so my mother and I, we just decided to drive up. He lived in Tallahassee, and we drove up. You know, when we got there about 2:30 in the morning, they were just now putting him into a hospital room, but he looked good. What I didn't know at the time is that he had stopped taking all his medication. You know, there's some other variables that were associated with that, right. But what that meant is not only was his immune system suppressed because of the disease, but he had no medication to support him as well. And within almost a 24-hour period of time, he passed away. So he had pneumonia, and he was fine on Monday morning, but by the afternoon, you began to see it affecting him. By the time we had left the hospital that evening, they had put on a mask, but there was no contemplation that he might die, but got the phone call about 3 o'clock in the morning that on Tuesday morning, and he passed away about 7. So that was on December 19th, you know, just a week away from Christmas. Wow. And again, very much family time. And so how do you navigate that? You know, one, it was a little bit startling, a little unexpected, you know, because again, he looked so good. Mm-hmm. But then and of course he was planning on coming home, he was going to come to Stewart for the holidays, and we were going to do our holiday event. And he's only 15 months older than I am, so we were very close in age. And very close growing up. We were. He actually followed me to Tallahassee. He did not go to college, but did follow me up to Tallahassee. I think that was related to our connectedness. So it was a big struggle. So immediately after, there's, how do you cope with that? Well, my coping mechanism is I'm a doer. I'm not one to kind of sit back, and everyone kind of responds, and we need to be very mindful of that, because when there is this expectation about how someone should grieve.
Right.
And for me, I'm probably not as traditional, right? So most people, I would say, isolate, are not doers. They're just the opposite. They shut down.
Right.
So I went to work the next day. And for me, that was very good, because I'm a therapist, right? So for me, helping someone engage into, when I saw my clients, it was a great respite from my own grief, because I got to manage what was going on with them as opposed to thinking about me. But it also forced me to connect to the other people that I was working with. So, my wife was still working. She's a school teacher, and so she was still working. So she wasn't going to be home. Now, she could have taken the day off as well, but we were about to have actually, I'm not sure she could have, because I think they had final exams, and, it's a big responsibility for a teacher. They needed to be there to kind of implement that. And so I'm like, well, I'm not going to stay at home. The boys are at school. My wife wasn't there, and so I went to work. And for me, being connected with other people was a very good resource for me.
Yes.
Telling the story about the process, because it was a little startling, the unexpected. And then once I learned that he had, and there are other variables. I don't need to get into all of that, but it was. And so then, as we got closer and closer to Christmas, so we had this family gathering. We all went to my parents' house for dinner, and what we chose to do that year is we left a chair and a plate, and as if he was represented there.
Right.
So that we weren't. This is that balance between, do we just not acknowledge it at all, right? We just persevere as if it does not exist, or do we go into a place of, well, let's cancel Christmas, it's not worthwhile.
Right.
And really, my opinion would be, is the healthiest thing to do is to do something in balance. We need to create some space to be able to feel the grief, right? It is real. But we also need to make sure that we are present for other people as well. So, of course, my relationship with my brother is very different than my kids' relationship with their uncle, or my wife's relationship with her brother-in-law, or my parents' relationship with their son. And so, we're all navigating that in a different way. And so we have to create space to honor the grief. But I would say that I think it might be wise to put a time limit on that day. I'm going to give an hour to be able to feel this, to honor it.
Right.
But then I'm going to be present to December 25th and be present with the other people that are here in the room, so that they get to have the quality Christmas that we as a family still deserve to have.
That is,
and how do you, and so to be mindful about keeping that
right.
balance.
I think that's key, is that balance. I love that. And I just want to take a minute to welcome some people that have joined us. Dorothy, Brian, Sue, Rudy, thank you so much for joining us. And if any of you have any questions or comments at any time, please feel free to jump in, and we will be more than happy to address your questions or your comments. We always appreciate the feedback. So in talking about that balance, I think that really is the key to, like you said, give that grief its time and space.
And be mindful of it.
Yes.
If it's an hour, if it's 2 hours, heck, you can do an entire day if we're talking about the holiday season.
Right.
But if we're talking about the Christmas in which we are with family, we need to be mindful about how our relationship, how we affect other relationships.
Sure.
And that's that. Yes, I want to honor it, but I also want to be present for this relationship at the same time.
Right. And I wanted to mention that, it might not be the healthiest choice for everyone to go to work the next day the way that you did, but clearly it was a very healthy choice for you, because it allowed you to connect with others. It allowed you to get out of yourself a little bit and help someone else. And one of the things that you mentioned in the guest column as well was volunteering. And so I just wanted to bring that up, because I thought that was a great suggestion, so that if your job doesn't lend itself to helping others, then maybe you make a choice to volunteer in honor of your lost loved one, maybe for a cause that they felt passionate about, or if they passed away via disease, maybe you go and specifically help people in that way, so that you're doing something very concrete, and then moving on from it and going back to the present, and being mindful of it. So
You know, years ago I read something about that a lot of people, when we're talking about prolonged grief, you know, someone who had passed away 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and we're still struggling within that relationship, that when we think about what is it that the person who died wants, do they want to remember? Do we want them, as speaking to the person who had died, for the other people that are left here, do they always want them to remember the space of which I am now present? Or do they want to remember the space in which I was here and joyful about that moment?
Right. That's a great point.
And I hope that if and when, I guess it's when I die, that people don't forget or don't focus on the fact that I'm not here anymore, but what it is that I brought into the relationship in the first place. And that gives us joy.
Absolutely.
And to remember that is the purpose of those relationships, is the joy that we have.
That's a great point, you know, and that makes me think of something because our friend Sue has joined us here. I see that she's watching, and I hope she doesn't mind me bringing this up, but when you talk about really thinking about what that person would want and honoring them in a joyful way, you know, we just had our Festival of Trees fundraiser, and Sue lost her brother in a very tragic way suddenly over the holidays last year, and Sue and her family chose to create a tree in our Festival of Trees dedicated to her brother, and it was such a joyful way to remember him, and it brought so many people so much happiness, and I just thought that was a very healthy and beautiful way. So Sue, I hope you don't mind me bringing that up, but
well, and the tree itself represented him, right? It was the things that he liked. It was the things in which we can honor him for it, as opposed to the loss, which of course is painful.
Right.
But it's like we want to be remembered for the things in which we connected.
Right.
And I think she did a terrific job to be able to do that.
I agree.
And share that with the community as well.
Right. So one of the other things that we see that really keeps people from finding joy over the holidays is those who cope with trauma or unpleasant childhood memories related to the holidays. Yes. And I know we've talked about that often in families that have a lot of dysfunction, alcoholism, domestic violence, those things can really amp up during the holidays. And so a lot of people have some really difficult memories of Christmas. And it's interesting because I was telling Jeff recently that my husband has never really been a big fan of Christmas. And it's always a very stressful time for him. And so I was talking to him this year about trying to get some insight from him on why is that? What is it specifically that causes that? And his response was very interesting because he told me that you know, there was a lot of dysfunction in his family broke apart, but that his greatest memories were of Christmas before that happened. That was when his family was at their happiest, and those were his fondest memories. Now, after the family broke apart, Christmas became a reminder of what he didn't have. And so he had a hard time letting that go, and it was a very interesting perspective to me because I never thought of that. And it just goes to show you that you really never know what people are thinking, and it really it was really helpful for me because it allows me to see things through his eyes and to understand a little bit better instead of just going, why can't you be happy at Christmas time? You know, it's really helped, and he is.
And that's so important. You know, it's so important that we have to ask.
Right.
And, and what can I do to make it happy? Yeah. Because I see that what your issue is and how that's affecting you. And one of the things to be mindful of is that those people that have had those experiences, it's what we call triggers. Triggers are when we have a difficult time distinguishing the difference between the past and the present. That basically the past is so caught up in the present, I can't be here in those relationships are present in this moment in time. And essentially that's what he's saying to you is that there probably is a level of joy being with you and the girls, but that joyfulness then reminds him of the joyfulness that he missed out on for so many years after a good start. Right. And that loss can be painful. Right, absolutely. And so what can I do to help support you so that we can honor that? Because again, we don't want to dismiss it, but we also don't want it to consume us and also then bleed into this relationships of things that I'm creating right now. Right. And let's talk about that a little bit more in a second, but I just wanted to address some comments that we had. Rudy said, what a loving way to remember someone. We love you, Sue. And Sue said, of course, I don't mind. Thank you for honoring my sweet Sammy. And that was Sue talking about her brother and the tree that they did
And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you. So one of the things then that in my family that we've done to kind of help my husband, you know, as you called it, I think rebrand Christmas, is come up with some of our own traditions that we can look forward to every year. And I love the way you put that, you know, so that if Christmas for you has been a negative thing and it brings up, you know, bad memories, that you have the power to rebrand that, come up with a new tradition. You know, if the traditional Christmas dinner is triggering for you because, you know, I'm making this up, but right.
And ham is a very distinct smell.
Right.
We actually know that smell is one of the biggest triggers that we have. Well, then let's create a new smell at the dinner table.
Right. So if you always had ham for holiday dinner, you don't have to do that. Let's have turkey. You know, if ham reminds you of, you know, your alcoholic father, that Christmas dinner was always unpleasant and things got ugly, you know, then get rid of that tradition, rebrand it, you know, do something different. So I like that. I thought that was just excellent advice. And figure out the things that do make you happy and focus on those over the holidays. And they don't have to be the typical things that make other people happy, you know, whatever it is that you are able to find some joy in. You know, if it's Christmas lights, build a tradition around that.
Well, and the great thing about the internet these days is that we have all those resources to be able to Google or I'm forgetting the name of the app where it's Instagram. It's Pinterest.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they have, you know, you just look on Pinterest and say Christmas traditions, and I'm sure there'll be 1,000 things on there, and something that may even connect to you. So, you know, I come from a Scottish tradition, so I could look up, Scottish Christmas traditions, and want to implement that and bring that into, you know, my nuclear family now, and that makes it meaningful to us on multiple levels.
Right.
And again, those resources, things that we're so much more global now, that gives us so many more options to be able to honor something within that gives us multiple levels of meaning.
Right, absolutely. So you also mentioned in the guest column that you wrote that self-care is crucial for those who anticipate feeling depressed. And actually that word anticipate is important too, because I think if you can anticipate it, you can get ahead of it a little bit. So
that was the intention of that word, is that if we are mindful about what has been in the past, then we can change it for the future.
Yes. And I think one of the other things that struck me that you mentioned is that, you know going in that if the holidays stress you out, and that if you have a tendency, if your coping mechanism is a negative one, which many of us have, that's reality, if it's overeating, if it's drinking too much, or any of those things, that's most likely going to happen, you know. But if you can get ahead of that a little bit and develop some strategies, and maybe you have some suggestions of ways to do that.
So let's talk about, because we talked about grief, we talked about triggers, but the other thing that goes along with the holiday season is just level of stress, right? So we're being pulled into lots of different directions. So there are a lot of employee work parties, friends and their parties. You know, for me, money is always a stressor, so that, you know, we're being stretched in ways that we typically are not, in the way that we have to buy gifts for people. You know, and then when we deal with our coping mechanisms, you know, some of our coping mechanisms actually exacerbate the level of stress that we have. So, for instance, if I'm a drinker, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not going to feel very good. If I don't feel very good, or if I don't get good enough sleep, then it also never remediates my stress. It actually, I'll just stack something new on it as the next day comes. So it makes it worse and worse as the days go by.
Right.
So, you know, although great to be able to think about the grief and the losses that we've had, it's great to be recognizing what those triggers are. We also need to acknowledge the level of stress that we are undergoing.
Right.
For those of us that are in business, this is also the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we have to manage, you know, all of our books and getting ready for, you know, our tax returns and all of those things. All of those things are all interrelated to those responsibilities that this time of year creates for us.
Right.
So this is where that self-care matters. And so what we have, my best metaphor of this is the plate, you know, so we only have so much room to fit on our plate. So I can stack something here and I can stack something here. What self-care is about is taking something off of my plate. So I may not be able to manage the tasks that I have to do, but I do know that by doing self-care, it can make my plate bigger so that I have more room to be able to manage the things that I have, so that's not overflowing, so that I'm no longer coping in the effective way. Right. And we've talked a little bit in previous Facebooks on self-care, but those are things like picking and choosing what event I'm going to go to, prioritizing those things. So I'm honoring how it is that I feel, recognizing where my level of stress is, and creating that balance of what's important and what's not important, and how do I go about managing that. Another one would be as it relates to money, that we budget about going into this. Of course, for those really great people out there, they can start in January and have their Christmas funds, so that they just pull out of that, and they've got their $800 or $1,000 that they're going to spend, and then they stick within that budget. That's
a great idea. So start, maybe in the new year, putting a little bit of money aside each month into the Christmas fund.
Yep. By the time we get to next December, you'll have $600. There are great apps out there. I think it's called Christmas Gift, I think was the app that I had found, which is specific to Christmas, which is great. Now, there are other budgeting apps, but that one was kind of nice because it's specifically related. So you list who it is that you're going to buy gifts for, and as you purchase them, you plug it in there, and it gives you your total so that you can stay within that budget.
That's great.
And moderate. Hey, if I saved it here, that means I could spend a little bit more. If I spent more, that means I'm going to need to modify it here.
Right.
And that helps you reduce that level of stress, because again, that goes back to that anticipating. I know what's coming up, so how do I plan to be able to moderate it as best that I can, because I can predict that there will be something that is unpredictable that will show up. And so if I've got enough, my plate is big enough, and I've left some room on there when that unpredictable thing happens, I still have space so that I'm still okay.
Right. That's great advice, because like we were talking about, when the dishwasher breaks the week before Christmas, or the car needs repairs, that's good for us. That kind of pre-planning doesn't throw you into just another level of stress.
And then make your Christmas miserable. It makes your spouse miserable and your kids miserable, because that isn't fun. This is supposed to be a joyful time. I know for us, our office is closed, so they're basically, even from an employer point of view, is I'm telling my employees, go have fun, go enjoy your families. But if I'm miserable, how am I going to do that? So it's like, okay, we plan and recognize, okay, how do I make my plate big enough so that I have space for all of those things? It's a way to be successful at that.
Right, that's great. And when you're talking about taking things off of that plate, I see so many people this time of year stressing about things that are really sort of insignificant in the big picture, but we make them so big. Christmas cards. Christmas cards. And here I am, it's 4 days before Christmas. I got half of the ones out that I wanted to, and I have to say to myself today, you know what, Lauren, if you don't get the other half out, it's okay. I'm going to refuse to let it, it will ruin Christmas and stress me out. And the time that I have, the vacation time that I have with my family over the holidays is important, and do I need to spend it, writing Christmas cards, or do I need to spend it going and doing something fun with my kids? So I think we have to let go of some of those expectations. You don't have to send Christmas cards every year. It's okay. You don't have to buy a gift for every single friend and family member either, especially if it's going to put you in a tough financial situation. And I will admit, I'm bad at this. I love spreading joy. I want to give. I'm a giver. I want to be able to do that. But if it's going to put your family in a tough situation, it's not really worth it. And I think there are some interesting and fun ways to get around that too. I know a family, they're a very large family. So they made a decision a few years ago that their Christmas is done as a secret Santa. So they all put their names in a hat in this family. They pull one name, and they each do one really special fun present. That way, they are not having to buy presents for, I think there are like 24 kids in this family. I mean, you'd go broke, So, I mean, that's something that you could suggest if buying for your extended family or friends stresses you out every year. Do a secret Santa instead. Find ways that, can ease that burden a little bit.
And so, that kind of triggered me of, do an inventory. At the end of this holiday season, figure out what worked, what didn't work, and then you can plan for next year about how you could do those things that didn't work differently, and duplicate those things that did work again. And it is about those, whether we're prioritizing about maybe I should do my Christmas cards, Thanksgiving weekend, so that I can remove that stress before December even comes.
Right.
And that's just one suggestion. Again, I think you're right. We do have the choice about whether we're going to do Christmas cards or not.
Right.
That's not a burden that we have to take on.
Right.
That we have the choice to be able to choose what it is that we're going to. Well, I did want to mention about, we talked about self-care as it related specifically to Christmas,
yes.
But it is always a good reminder to think of the other self-cares that we do. Getting enough sleep. I cannot stress that enough, that there's tons and tons of research about how that cleans our plate every single night, that when we do not get enough good sleep, that happens. Right. Fortunately, we live in Florida. We have beautiful weather outside. That getting outside, breathing the fresh air, being one with nature is a great stress reducer. Even if it's only 5 minutes, 10 minutes, taking the walk, taking the time to be present within our surroundings allows our stress to go down, our blood pressure to go down, our heart rates to go down, so that we can recoup for when we're back on the treadmill again. Exercise is another one of those good things. We know that although exercise in and of itself can be strenuous, the response afterwards, the recovery period, is what your body thrives for the most. So to be mindful of that. Diets, as we know, Christmas holidays are all about carbohydrates.
Sugar everywhere.
And the thing, what we've learned about sugar is it really affects our mood. And so to be understanding of, one, that is why, sometimes we have that moodiness, is because at lunchtime I had all of the sugar, or because of all the treats in our potluck that we had here at our office yesterday. That afternoon I could be experiencing a lull because, my levels have dropped and now I need more sugar because, my insulin was so high, blah, blah, blah. To be mindful of our diet as we navigate that through the holiday season.
Right.
One of the other things is, we talked about triggers in a negative way. We should be thinking about triggers in a positive way as well. So like for me, and I know this is going to sound weird to people, I love fruitcake.
Do you really?
I know, I think I'm the only American that loves fruitcake. So, last Monday I come home from work and my wife has bought me a fruitcake. That brings me joy. And again, from a sugar perspective, probably not the best thing in the world. But for whatever reason, my grandmother used to make fruitcake every year. Now, her fruitcake was drenched in rum. And maybe as a kid, that's why I enjoyed it so much. And this is the Publix brand of fruitcake. But nonetheless, it was the concoction of it that brings back so many positive memories for it, that it's not just about the fruitcake, but it's about those positive triggers that are associated with it as well. So again, intention, right, and predictability of that, so that I can, since I'm anticipating what the stressors are, let me make sure that I'm doing those things to mediate that as well. So thinking about what those positive triggers can be, and making sure that I weave them in there, because when I get stressed, right, my thinking begins to go away. So if I'm intentional about those things, making sure those things are placed in there, then I'm more likely to have that happen.
Never thought about, triggers in a positive way. That's a really good point. So one thing that I wanted to mention was something that I saw again on Facebook this morning. Oh, I just want to say, OBrien. OBrien says, "Yay, I'm famous now." That's my husband. Sorry to make you famous, Brian. But,
it's good cause.
Yes, that's right. And then he also said, I was thinking about this too, Brian. My aunt got me a fruitcake for Christmas one year. I totally thought it was a joke at first. And we did it.
I'll take your fruitcake if you don't want it.
I remember that. And yes, we kind of thought it was a joke as we were opening it. And then we quickly realized it wasn't. So yeah, that was interesting. But yes, I think you're the first person I've ever met that actually really loves fruitcake.
A fruitcake this year. Yes, one for my wife, and then we have our secret Santa that we have. And whoever gave me fruitcake. They must have known that I liked it.
I want to get you next year.
That's fine. I'm covered for it.
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty good. Oh, I want to say hi to Raina. Hi, Raina. Thank you for joining us. Another wonderful volunteer from our Festival of Trees event. So one thing that I wanted to touch on, because I saw it on Facebook this morning, and it was another holiday stressor or sort of depression issue, tough time that I had not really thought about in regards to this conversation until a friend of mine posted it this morning. And it was a picture of her two daughters at the airport, young daughters, same age as my girls, they're friends. And she was posting about how devastating Christmas always is for her, as she has to put her 2 daughters on a plane to go out of state to visit their father. And that really struck me, that's another thing that so many families have to deal with this time of year, is that shared custody and divorced and blended family issues. And I was wondering if you had any tips for families that are dealing with that and maybe not getting to have their kids with them Christmas morning. Any advice?
Well, it goes back. First, I'm going to say the first thing that we have to do is honor the grief, right? And again, my MO is to stop. And so that's why I think I always am mindful of making sure that I do honor those experiences in the first place. So it's a loss.
Right.
I mean, it is a loss. And so then it goes back to, okay, so how do I manage this? Because as a parent, right, part of my job is to show my kids about how to cope with these kinds of situations. Right. So what is it that they're experiencing, right? What is their loss going to be? How do I make sure that it has the least amount of impact? Kids in particular, most of the time, love both parents, right? So can you imagine the loss that they're automatically going to feel as well, that they're not going to spend time with mom, or they're not going to spend time with dad,
right?
That no matter what, it's never going to win for them.
Right.
Because at least one parent in this situation is going to have their kids. So my best advice in that is create a different Christmas. We make Thanksgiving the 4th Thursday of November. We make Christmas December 25th. We make, your birthday, your birthday. But we have to acknowledge that it is just a day, and that we can duplicate and make it so on another day.
Right.
So if, for instance, in my divorce agreement, I know that every other year I'm not going to be able to have Christmas with my kids, but then I can make Christmas every other year on December 20th.
Right. And
that becomes our day. And we hype up the family as it relates to December 20th and not December 25th. And so what are those traditions that we do? One of the things we do in my family is at midnight, we open the presents on Christmas Eve, or at 12:01 Christmas Day. One present, and then we do the rest the following day. Well, we could do that on December 19th. So we follow that same tradition and create that dinner time, the family time, and those traditions all within the context of a different day, so that we can have that joyfulness within the context that we don't feel like we are missing out on anything.
Right.
And what a message we send to our kids, that yes, the day matters, but it's not everything. That we can duplicate that, and again, it goes back to intention. And what is it that we choose to focus on? Do we focus on what it is that we're losing, or can we focus on what it is that we do have? And how do we remember those things in the past? And so, again, I don't want to minimize this mom's loss, because that is a very real thing.
Right.
And she probably will have to do this throughout not just childhood, but in adult life as well.
Right.
About how to mediate those relationships, because again, from the kids' perspective, their mom and dad is still their mom and dad. And if moms and dads can't get along, it means that they won't ever have a Christmas in which they can have that shared experience.
Right.
They have kids now, right? Well, can grandma and grandpa come over to be able to watch their kids, their grandkids, be able to open presents? Well, they can't get along, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So that's going to be an experience that they will never have. So, of course, ideally, it would be nice if everyone could at some point in time get along, but we know that that's not always realistic.
Right.
So how do we duplicate it in a way that can be manageable?
That's
and
great.
that would be my best advice to them, is just to duplicate the day and make it traditional.
Right.
Right, because it's predictable. So again, in the divorce agreement, and that's the most common thing that I see, is it's 1 year on, 1 year off.
Right.
So make a day.
Right.
Make that your day on that year,
Right.
whether it's the odd year or the even year.
I think that's great advice. I love that. And kind of related to that, and I feel bad that I kind of called my friend out, and even though I won't use her name, but I do want to say that I think it's important, though, to be honest the way she was in that moment, because we mentioned again this societal pressure in the holidays. There's life is not a Lifetime movie. The reality when you actually talk to people is that most of us are struggling in some way with one of these issues. And the more we can talk about it, just like mental health in general, the more connected we can feel to other people, and the more we can say to each other, oh, really, you don't feel great at the holidays either, And sometimes we're all sort of putting on a little bit of a facade, and And that's okay, because you're not alone if you struggle at the holidays, and I think that's important.
Well, so that just kind of triggered me a little. So for her, December 25th is going to be a triggering day, right? Because it's still going to be Christmas in everyone else's world.
Right.
So what do I do to honor myself on that particular day? And again, if we can intentionally do something special for ourselves, one of the other things that my wife joked about on the op-ed was buying yourself a gift.
Right.
Which I would never do because I don't spend money, so I'm not going to buy myself a gift. So that was a little hypocritical of me to say, but lots of people do like to spend money, and so they're going to do that kind of stuff. So buy yourself a gift. Open it on December 25th. Have your little mini Christmas, and then do something fun.
Right.
And fortunately, 20 years ago, everything was closed, but now a lot of things are open in the afternoon. And so there are a lot more options available to us to be able to do so that we can feel good on that day, because for her it's going to be very difficult. And if she's a single mom, then she may not even have family to go to, so she's going to be so get invited to another family's party, go and do something that's going to honor you, so that that day doesn't become.
That's a great idea. And
so the following December, when she has her kids, she can still be joyful and not be fretting over what's going to be happening on Christmas.
And for, a busy working mom like she is, I mean, that really is a great opportunity. Go see a movie by yourself. We never get to do that, or
popcorn.
Yeah, do really, I like that. Really make that about you and do something for yourself that day. That's great advice. If anybody has any questions, we're going to be wrapping up shortly here, so feel free to ask if you have any questions or comments, any advice, maybe ways that you've coped around the holidays. Yeah, absolutely.
So let me add this in. We have often talked about suicide in our in these Facebook lives, and which is a very real. As we know, 45,000 people took their life in 2016. So we always need to be very mindful about suicide.
Yes.
So interesting enough about the holidays, during the holiday period, actually there isn't a lot of suicide. When that really hits is after the holidays. Really? So it's a reflection of that it never did happen, right? That I was hopeful that I would have been invited. I was hopeful that I would have connected, that this Christmas would have been different. And that when it didn't happen, the hopelessness gets a little bit deeper. And as I've mentioned before, one of the characteristics of suicidal people is their focus really, really narrows in, that they think that this really is the only option, or that it will only be this way. So one of the things I want people to be mindful of is, if you know that there are those people out there struggling, invite them. Help them connect. We know that someone who feels connected is what gives them hope. So we can be intentional about looking in our social circle about who can we do that good deed for. But also to be aware of that the post-holidays, that's when people are going to struggle the most. So to be aware of those individuals as well, and that we can be as preventative as possible. And as we've always talked about, talking about it does help. If it does not introduce the idea of suicide, that you need to be very frank to ask, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of suicide? You will not cause someone to make that decision, because believe me, it's already there. And again, that focus becomes it's the only option. But if we present, there are other options, there are other ways to be able to do that, it creates that hope.
Right, and you could be that one person that provides an anchor for that person and brings them back into that hopeful place.
You never know what it is that you're going to say. It just reminds me of when my wife and I went on our honeymoon. We went on a cruise, and we sat with 4 other couples. Well, one of the other couples was an older couple, so all the other couples, the other 3 couples, were all newlyweds. So here are 4 sets of newlyweds, and this older couple seems a little odd. And at the end of the evening, the one guy said to the other couple, "I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow night." So when she came back the next day, the older lady said, the only reason I came back to this table, because clearly I'm different than everyone else here, is because you said, I'm looking forward to seeing them next night. We never know what it is that we say and how that connects to other people. So it's a good lesson to learn. And that it was very sweet of her, because she actually didn't mention it until the end of the second evening. That's why she came back. And that's that you belong here.
Yes.
That's what he was saying to her.
Yes.
Is you belong here, even though she didn't look like anyone else. It can be that simple. We're not asking about people doing really difficult things. It can be that simple.
Wow.
Looking forward to seeing you on Monday.
Mm. You know what? On that note, I think we'll wrap it up because that's really, really powerful and really important. So thank you. I want to wish everyone that celebrates a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and remember that if Christmas isn't always joyful for you, that you are not alone, and it's okay. And
Can I plug maybe 211?
Of course.
For those people that, resource that we have in our community is 211, and if you are feeling desperate, please call them.
Yes.
And that they can be a resource. They're 24 hours a day. They have those resources. Not only can you call them, you can text message them, you can message them on their website. So whatever venue that you utilize in order to connect, they have that resource there. So
great.
Please use it, and I too. Have a wonderful Christmas and a New Year, and we will see you in 2018.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye-bye.